So this is the new skin. This is sort of what I was talking about here. Pretty regular UI, I guess I would say. We are embedding more YouTube videos these days where it makes sense. Our home pages do still exist. So, this is the HyperMesh homepage, which is pretty sparse, I suppose you could say. But the TOC does sort of the rest of what we were doing with the categories on the homepage. And then this broader homepage where we've got the links to HyperWorks applications, various ModViz and solvers and so on, that still exists. So we had to build this special. So here's the tool finder, and I'm on the staging server. So in 2024.1, we just put that up there, and we'll have a link to the interactive tool finder itself. And maybe some of you are familiar with it, but essentially it's just it's the old UI. And if you click around the panels, I think even some of the drop downs are hooked up. You will get sort of links to the replacement tools and the help for that replacement tool right from the old UI. Did I lose? Oh, I'll just go back. Kevin's also added videos in some more complex areas where they exist. So in HyperWorks, for example, there happens to be a YouTube video, and I think there are in various other places too. So a few upgrades.
Okay, so I just have a couple slides here and a quick demo for some of the stuff that's in 24.1. Big one is the new theme. It's not a new theme from scratch. It's basically just going to look at your Windows settings for this light or dark theme if you use that in Windows, and then if you have the custom type in Windows, you can choose light or dark for your apps. It's going to recognize what you've chosen, and then in our product, all of our products, SimLab or Inspire, HyperWorks, everything except for SimLab, will have this new automatic theme as default, and then it will choose the appropriate theme based on your Windows settings. So if you use dark theme in Windows, then it's going to use dark theme out of the box for HyperWorks. We don't have it working yet for Linux, but for Windows users, this is going to be the new theme. So I think a lot more people will be exposed to dark theme if that's kind of what they prefer in their applications. The other thing we did was some stuff with micros. So I'm just going to hop into a demo with that. It's easier to show. Micro dialogues, as you guys know, they generally appear near your mouse, and that's what they're designed to do. When you do something, it shows up near your mouse. The idea has always been to reduce mouse miles, but you can get into some issues in that sometimes if you are clicking on something specific, like an element or something, it's going to appear where that element is. And obviously, if it's in the graphics area, that's fine. But if it's off the screen, if you click on a list of something, then sometimes your micro can be off the screen somewhere, or not off the screen. It'll always be on the screen, but off in some corner based on where that entity was that you selected. So we've had some feedback that people want the micros to be easier to find and see. So if I bring up a micro here, we've added some new options under appearance, and one of those is called thick borders. Basically, if I apply that, it's for micro dialogues, not regular dialogues, but micro dialogues. It's going to double the width of the border to make it a little bit easier to see. And we also have this custom border color, so you can set the borders of the micros to any color you want, and just make them stand out a bit more. So, and that's going to apply to any micro from then on. So if you create something, then these micros are all going to be easier to see. The other thing we've done, which I think will be pretty popular, is this lock micro dialog position. So like I was saying, if you click on something, sometimes it can go off the screen. So the idea here is that if you have a micro dialog and you click and manually drag it to a new position, then any other micro dialog you create in the future for any tool is going to be at that same location. So it will remember that location, and even if there's multiple micros like this one, if you move one of them wherever you move that one, then all the tools in the future would be at that new location. So you don't have to worry about your micro dialogues hopping around the screen. Or sometimes in the past, we've had things where you pan your model around and it's going to follow the model and get in the way of your mouse. So you can move them to wherever you want, and they will stay in that position across the product. And this also works for multiple windows. So if you have some kind of split application or everything, then it's going to appear in the same spot across each window. So if you chose the kind of the lower left corner or something, or the lower right corner, then you do a new window or a split window, it would appear in the same general location across all those windows. So yeah, so that's it. Just the new options, totally optional. They'll all be off by default. Okay, well that was it. Just a quick one for me, and we can move over to Chema.
So I will talk about our new chatbot that we have checked into 24.1. This is called the Altair Copilot AI Assistant, and it's currently in beta form, but it's a public beta, so there's no need for an environment variable or anything anymore. It's just going to be available for everyone. So basically, this is what it is basically an in-app chatbot. Is basically what we call an AI assistant under this new umbrella of Altair Copilot. So there might be other AI features that will exist under this umbrella. In this particular instance, is an desktop support assistant. It's basically an AI-powered support chatbot that works with natural language. So it uses an LLM or large language model to communicate using natural language. It understands your questions using just regular language, like you would do with other AI-based chatbots. The difference with ours is that it is not your typical public internet chatbot. It is ours. Will only respond from our own curated material and what we allow it to. Basically what we train it on specifically, which is mostly our online documentation. So plus a few other sources. So mainly online help, but also community KB articles. We are recently added the how-to YouTube video series. That's a little bit of an experiment, but we've basically gotten the transcripts from those, and we're training. We've given access to that to the chatbot. We've also recently added a few of the popular e-learning packages. And we plan to continue expanding this sort of sources. But that's basically the main part of this, that it'll only answer a question if it's found in this in any of these material, and it will always give you a link to the place, well, to the top three sources where the answer came from. And again, it will never point you to any internet, public sites or anything outside links to our own materials. Because of this, there's also some pluses that if you've used other AI chatbots, you know that sometimes there's this phenomenon called hallucination, where some AIs may invent some non-existing answers or tools or features that don't exist. That one, we almost don't have this problem. Is very much minimized because of this also constrained approach that we have, that it will only answer things that it does find in this material. Otherwise, it'll just tell you that it didn't find it. So again, it doesn't mean that it's perfect. It can still either fail to find an answer or retrieve something. It can still get confused depending on the verbiage and depending on the wording. But it usually depends on the wording used and on the quality of the sources themselves. It also keeps track of your current question and the previous question. So we don't have a comprehensive history for technical reasons yet, but we do keep track of the previous question. So it is possible to ask a follow-up, and I'll show some of that in my demo a little bit later. But yeah, basically, if you ask something and it gave you a partial answer, or you have a new question based on that, on your previous answer, you can ask a follow-up, and you can assume that the chatbot will know what it's talking about based on the previous answer, and so on. So it always knows. You can assume that it knows about the previous question and previous answer. This also has some automatic filtering, so topics are narrowed automatically based on the active application. This is actually developed at the framework level. So currently it's exposed only for the HyperWorks desktop apps. So you'll see it in HyperMesh, HyperView, HyperGraph, HyperMesh CFD, MVH, HyperLife. But soon, depending on the success in this, we do plan to soon deploy it in more applications such as Inspire, SimLab, etc. But as an example, if you're using HyperMesh, we do detect the client, and we will only answer questions regarding that. This was important because some tools are slightly different in CFD or in MVH, and without this, you would get potentially confusing information or tools that don't exist in your current profile. And the same happens with a solver. So we also detect your current solver if it's applicable. For example, in HyperMesh, you can be in the OptiStruct or Radius user profiles. It also will answer any solver questions that are in the solver documentation for the currently active solver profile. It also supports multiple languages, which are detected automatically. So you can try to ask a question in your own language, and it should detect an answer in that question. You can also ask it to answer in a different language in case it's something you want. And finally, it uses an active internet connection. So all of our AI backend is in the cloud. So you do require an active internet connection to use it. So it's kind of akin to doing a search to go into our online help and doing a search. In this case, it's a different kind of search using our AI assistant, but it's basically a similar concept. So you do require an internet connection. If you don't have it, then you'll just get a message saying that there's no connection. And now I'll show some demos. So it's accessible up here on the right side. Let me pause it a bit. So you'll get a button here in the upper right corner. And it's also on the view pull down. You should see also an entrance. What you see when you launch it is it'll be a docked window inside your application. By default, it'll be docked on the right. But of course, you can float it. You can drag it to float it. You can double click it also to float it. And you can dock it in any other place or have it floating around or even, I don't know, in another monitor or etc. Anything that you can do with a regular dock window. It has a little welcome screen with some basic information and definition here. This is all also controlled by us, so you might see this changing. This comes also from the server, so we might post new messages here and notices, etc. And it has some sample questions that you will also see changing. They are randomized, and these are also constantly changing, so you might see new things next time you open it. Here, I'm choosing to use one of the sample questions, why should I add parts to my model? And it'll give you an answer. This is the format that you'll get an answer. You'll get a sort of a brief response and some references. Usually this means that the answer comes from one or more of these. They can be links to the documentation. Right now it's pointing to the staging server. That'll change before the actual release. It'll actually point you to the regular site. It might point you to e-learning site if some answers or some related topic was found there. It might point you to the community as well. Here I'm asking a follow-up. I ask, why should I add parts? Then how do I create one? It's telling me, in the part browser, you can just right-click create. Now I might ask it, well, how do I open the part browser? Now it's telling me to open the part browser, go to the assembly ribbon and click on parts. So I'll do that. And I also maybe notice something in the entity editor of my part that I want to ask about. I see this major revision attribute. What is it? It'll give me a brief response about it, explaining to me what the major revision is. And now I might ask, well, what other types of revisions are there? And it'll give me more information. So I can, change. Let me go to the next one. Chain queries like that. In this next one, I'm using another one of the sample tools. This is another type of question you can ask, a little more conceptual about tips on doing one thing or the other. If such things are documented, you will get a summary of them. I might ask something more specific, like what's the best way of moving a component using 3 points? I think that's a popular question. Now it's telling you to use the move tool, and in this case, is guiding you to switch to the positioning mode in the move tool. So that's a good insight for when you want to move specifically with 3 locations. Here's another example where I have 2 different tools which are documented separately, and I might ask, what's the difference between a mid-mesh and a mid-surface? Because I see both things, and I might be a new user, and I want to know a little bit more about them. And it's giving me a quick summary of those and a little comparison here. In summary, a mid-mesh directly creates a mesh at the midplane, bypassing the need to create a surface, etc. I just want to make a comment on this. Currently, and we're working on expanding this, but our bot is mostly well suited to answer when there's to assemble a complex answer from up to 3 different sources. We look at the top 3 sources for technical reasons. We're looking to expand that, but as of now, that is the thing. So if you try to ask more complex process where the chatbot is expected to understand or assemble an answer based on 10 different documents, it might have a harder time. It'll still attempt to do it, but it might, or if you ask it, give me a list of all the tools that have, a remeshing option or a rebuilding option, something like that. It will give you the top 3, but it won't go beyond that. It won't inspect every single one and gather information from them. Again, that might change as we evolve this new feature, but that's just for your information. That's currently an important thing to consider. But when you ask about 2 or 3 things, it will ask it. Here I'm inside a tool and I find an option. There's some tooltip, but maybe all of the options are not tooltipped, or I want to just know a little bit more about it. So I can tell it, I'm specifically in this tool. Can you explain the mapping methods to me? And now it's giving me the information on all of them. In this case, that it knows about all of them, so you can also ask about differences between one or the other specifically. Here's a solver-based demo. So in this one, I am in the OptiStruct user profile. I have a P-shell card, and I see one of the attributes. I want to ask about it. What does it mean? What is this I12T3 value? Now it's telling me that is the bending stiffness. What does Z1 and C2 mean? Here, I don't have to say again in the P-shell. Now it knows we're talking about P-shell because it's a follow-up question. So I just say, what about C1 and C2? There you go, there are fiber distances. So now I'll try asking a more general question. I just want to show you that it detects it's a solver. So I'm just saying a kind of very general question. Tell me about a shell property. And here is telling me about a P-shell bulk data entry. I'm going to go in here and switch the user profile to radios. And I'm going to ask the same question again. Tell me about a shell property. I'm not telling, which solver or anything. And now the answer is telling me about block format keyword prop type 1 P-shell. So it knows that I am now working on radios. So if I ask about a solver keyword or anything solver related, it knows that we're working with radios. Finally, to finish off this demo, I wanted to show you one of the experimental features that we have there. We also have trained it on our public API, so the TCL API, and the more we grow the Python APIs and they are documented, they are also going to go in to the training of the bot. And when you ask about something in general, like if you say, tell me how to translate a component or tell me how to mirror a component, we don't want those type of answers to. Sometimes the bot in the past, before we have this separation, it would give us sometimes commands. For example, oh, you can do that with this command or with that command. That's not usually the answer we're looking for when someone asks a general question, unless you're actually working with scripting and you really want a response in the form of an API or a script. So whenever you have a general question that you want answered in the form of commands and scripts, or if you specifically want to request for a scripting guidance, for example, here I'm asking a question, please create a HyperMesh TCL script that will prompt the user to select a component, then we'll prompt the user to select two nodes, A and B. Then it will translate the component, any selected components using a vector from those nodes. If you add this command at the end, this hashtag script, that's what we're using to key off of. So it's a command that you can input to the bot. It can be anywhere in your question. If you add that # hashtag script, then it will prompt the bot to answer in a different way, in the form of looking at the API documentation. It should be fast. I sped up the typing so that you don't have to see me typing all that much. Also, here, the timing it takes to answer, I also did some editing so that you don't have to sit and wait. It is on average, for all the other questions, it is actually what I'm showing you. But for longer questions like this, especially for scripting, it might take a few more seconds to actually generate. The longer the answer is, basically, the longer it'll take to generate. So here, it's giving me a scripting answer, HyperMesh TCL script. I am going to attempt to run it without even looking at it. Now, if you have some experience using AI tools for running scripts, you might be familiar with the typical steps for this, but I want to share with you as well. Here, this is going to be my first attempt of just running it. Many times you'll get errors. This time, it's just asking me for a component. Now it says, now select the two nodes. It decided to ask me for the two nodes in one go. Sometimes it'll architect it slightly different, and it'll say first select one node and click OK, then select the second node and click OK. It's kind of different depending on the day. And then here, looks like it did something. It's even reporting that what it did. It's not exactly what I wanted because I selected a node here, a node there, but it actually did something, like it did an error out. So that means the ingredients are there. So this is very typical. So of what would happen with AI generated scripts. So you do have to, don't expect that it'll run great the first time. In this case, I'm going to inspect it a little bit, and I see that there's a magnitude that it did calculate. It's doing the deltas, the typical ingredients of what I asked it to do. And it did translate. That means the command is correct, but something about it didn't do it the right thing. So I identified this translate mark command that it is using. So I'm going to ask about it. So what arguments does the translate mark command take? Hashtag script. I have to do that if I want to answer basically from the API or the reference documentation. Notice another thing that I want to highlight is when I'm asking for hashtag script, I am also specifying that I want a HyperMesh TCL script, because our API documentations are I think many times they're not product specific. I think in that reference guide we have a combination of products. So if you want to avoid it, thinking that it can use HWC command or some other commands for different languages that we have or different groups of APIs, then the more verbose you can be, it's always the better in general. So here is giving me the documentation on the translate mark command, and I can see that this is vector ID, and it says that it has to be defined using create vector command. So I think that's the key, is not creating the vector. So here you can do two things. Now you know what was missing. So you can either just add a one-liner here with create vector that was missing, and then you'll have a running script. Or alternatively, you can try to just steer, where the issue is, so you can steer the chatbot itself towards fixing it. So I want to show that example here. I'm going to paste again my query, and I'm going to just be more specific, where I'm telling it to use a vector, and I'm going to say in parentheses, you have to create it using /create vector because I just learned that. So I'm just going to tell it, use the create vector command in parentheses, and I want to try to run it again. And let's see what comes out. And here I got a new script. Normally these responses are in the form of a summary, then the script, then a little explanation. Here I'm going to copy paste the script again. Select it, right click copy. Note that currently you cannot use Control-C. We do have an issue with the shortcut there. There is a ticket for it, but you can use right click copy instead. And I'm going to paste the new script. I can see already that it did what I asked it. So now you can see that it added the create vector. But I also noticed that now the translate mark, it did one thing and undid the other one. The previous one got the magnitude correct, but now it did the vector and it kind of forgot to put the magnitude. So again, because you know that, you can simply just add the magnitude here or copy paste it from the previous one, and you'll have a working script. Here, I just wanted to show that you can further steer the chatbot So here I have pasted. I didn't even run it. I'm just going to paste my question again, and I'm going to further rephrase it. I'm going to also tell it, remember, you have to calculate the distance from the nodes. So I'm telling it you have to use the vector created with this command, and you have to calculate the distance and use the distance magnitude, because I just learned about that mistake. And then now I get the new script, which I'm going to copy, paste it and hit run. Now I can see that it seems okay. Now it has the magnitude, it has the create vector, and is using the command correctly. So there we go. One typical use case of this, which I've said there. Now I did correct the translation, and I get a little message. So now worked correctly. Perfect. For example, one example that I think happens often with this is some commands that we have are documented in such a way that the chatbot sometimes thinks that the AI sometimes thinks that they can be used for anything. Things like HMGetValue or create entity. They're so generic, or set value. They're used for a broad set of capabilities, and sometimes the AI just thinks it can use that for things that are not supported. In those cases, you'll get a very clear error, and it'll say, you cannot use get value or set value with this. And then you can also tell the bot, don't use get value, because you just saw that it created an error. So if you tell it, then it'll try to search for the next best thing. Anyway, I just wanted to summarize to finalize, to finish this section of the presentation. Some tips. Again, I think I mentioned most of these during the previous demos. Assembling answers from different partial sources. The chatbot is best at answering things that it can find in one location, but it can do it up to 3 different locations. So if it finds bits and pieces of an answer, it'll assemble up to 3. Again, we are constantly updating this. We might make it smarter in the future, but for now, that's a fact. You can ask follow-up questions, but you can assume that it knows only about your previous question. There's another general recommendation here with technical synonyms and terms. I know we have like in our FE world, we have a broad language as well. So sometimes if you notice that it's getting confused, sometimes you can try rewording your question using more general terms. For example, saying rigits instead of spiders, things like that. And I showed you about a hashtag script. This is an experimental feature, so you can expect that things with this might change as we keep working on this new type of feature. The quality of the AI-generated scripts will be variable, and often some tuning or debugging is required, but it can be also a great tool to sort of help you steer you in the right direction. It might tell you about a command. You don't need to ask it for a full script. I think that works only for simple things. For more complex scripts, of course, but you might want to ask it about specifically one command, or if there is a command to do such thing, this or that, or what type of arguments, etc. And it is beta, like I said, so that means it is an evolving feature, and so as expected, some or all of its components are subject to change. But this is the shape that it has as of now in 24.1, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.